Hi, today we're going to talk about the managerial theory, a theory of the responsibility of business managers developed originally by Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman was one of the 20th century's most famous and most influential economists. He won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 1976, largely for his development of the theory of monetarism. The Monetary History of the United States that he wrote with Anna Schwartz is a classic that defined what monetarism is. And monetarism remains one of perhaps the three main approaches to economics as a whole. Friedman thought a lot about the question of what the responsibilities of business managers are. And in thinking about that, he thinks about, initially, us as individuals. He says, we can analyze this by starting to think about what you and I have as our obligations, and then we can think about how to apply that within a business. So what are your obligations? What are my obligations? His answer is, well, first of all, I have legal obligations. I have an obligation to obey the law. Secondly, I have moral obligations. I have obligations to be ethical in my dealings. Milton Friedman is not an ethicist. He doesn't go into detail about just what my ethical obligations are. But the point is, I should obey the law, fulfill my legal obligations. I should obey whatever code of ethics is the right code of ethics. I should be ethical. I should obey my moral obligations. And then finally, I should be prudent. I should look out for my own self-interest. So I should fulfill my responsibilities as the law defines them, as morality defines them, and then I'm free to act in my own self-interest. Well, let's apply that to a business. What about owners of a business? Well, they should do the same thing. The owner of a business should follow the law, should obey ethical constraints and be an ethical person, but also then can pursue their self-interest. In fact, should pursue their self-interest. If someone fails to do that, does a lot of things that are really self-destructive or self-defeating, we tend to think that's dumb, and actually, in a way, failing to fulfill an obligation they have to themselves. So, the owner of a business is entitled to do that. What about the manager in a business? What is their responsibility? Well, again, they should follow the law. They should be ethical. But now what beyond that? They can pursue their own self-interest too. But they are acting as the agents of the owners. A manager is an agent of the owners of the business. And that gives us a special kind of issue to deal with, a special kind of problem. In general, we need to think about the relationship between principals and their agents. Now, that kind of relationship arises in lots of different contexts, not just in the context of a business and an owner hiring a manager as his or her agent. Instead, we have to think there are lots of situations like this. A famous movie star, for example, or a sports star, an athlete, hiring an agent to represent them. They aren't experts in the law. They aren't experts in negotiation. They hire an agent with greater knowledge to represent their interests. The same thing happens if you or I hire a real estate agent. We have somebody who has greater expertise in buying and selling property. We need their help to fulfill our aims. The job of the real estate agent is to help us achieve our aims. The same thing is true for hiring a lawyer. If I hire a lawyer, the lawyer's job is to represent my interests. I need the lawyer because I don't have the legal expertise. I don't have the ability to do what I need to have done, but the lawyer does. And the lawyer should do that, but to serve my interests. Now that tells us something important about the relationship between principals and their agents. The job of the agent and the responsibility, morally, of the agent is to promote the principal's interests. Now, of course, that is within the constraints, again, of the law and morality. So I'm not saying at all that the agent should represent the principal's interests and promote them no matter what the law says, no matter what ethics says. They're not entitled to be engaging in illegal or immoral activities to promote the interests of the principal. Nevertheless, the agent's job, their moral responsibility, is to promote the interests of the principal within the constraints of the law and of morality. Well, if that's true, let's apply that principle to business managers. The job of the manager then is, yes, to follow the law, to be ethical, but then the manager has a moral responsibility to represent within those constraints the interests of the owners. So what should a business manager do? Besides follow the law and be ethical, the answer is promote the interests of the owners. Well, in the case of a small business, there might be one owner. In the case of a larger business, there might be a number of partners. It could well be that there's a large number, maybe even millions of shareholders, but those are the owners of the company. Those are the people whose interests ought to be promoted by the manager. So in this case, the manager's responsibilities are really quite straightforward. Their job is to promote the interests of the owners of the company within the constraints of morality and the law. Friedman gives us two arguments for this. One, the positive argument, I've already outlined. That in general is what human responsibilities are like and what an agent is. I should follow the law, I should be ethical, and I should promote my self-interests. If I'm someone else's agent, I should follow the law, I should be ethical, and I should promote their interests. Well, so far so good. But what does that mean about social responsibility? Here Friedman turns to a more negative argument. There is no problem with responsibilities to the community that are going to in the end help the company. And so it may well be that in order to promote the interests of the owners, I should, in fact, contribute to the community. I have an imperfect obligation to do that, and it serves our interests, and in this case, the interests of the owners if I do it. It improves our brand image. It strengthens the community. It helps our customers. It helps us attract good employees to the area. It helps us keep the employees we have. For many reasons, helping the community may well help the company. And again, that can be fine. That's promoting the interests of the owners. That's uncontroversial. No problem with that. But what about doing things for the community that do not in any way rebound to the benefit of the company or the owners? Is that a legitimate thing for a manager to do? Friedman says no. Now, why not? Here he gives us not only the positive argument I've just outlined, but a negative argument. He says, look, under what circumstances can I actually take money that is your money and contribute it to some other cause? Surely only with your voluntary consent. I can't break into your house, steal your money, and then give it to a good cause, and then say, I'm a virtuous person, I've done something great for the community, I rob from the rich and I give to the worthy arts organizations or to those helping the homeless, etc., etc. No, I can't do that. I can contribute my own money. I'm making a choice to do that. But I can't contribute your money without your consent. And so the first issue that Friedman is worried about is that the legitimacy of doing this kind of thing requires people's consent. Well, it could well be that the owners hire somebody to engage in these kinds of corporate social responsibility activities for the community, and that they do give their consent. And if that's okay, well, okay. If it's okay with the owners, if the owners consent to these things, then Friedman would have no problem with that. However, in a large corporation, how likely is that? Are the shareholders going to be in a position of making a decision and giving consent to every sort of gift of this kind that the corporation might make? No. And so Friedman first of all worries that if the company is very large and if the specific ways in which this sort of external obligation, external imperfect obligation is fulfilled to the community, if that doesn't receive the consent of the owners, he thinks there's something illegitimate about it. It really is more like taking some money from somebody else's pocket and then giving it to a worthy cause. But there's another problem as well. What guarantees that cause is worthy? What guarantees that that really helps the community? Think carefully about the position that this puts corporations in. All sorts of people are going to be asking them for contributions, asking them to help contribute to the community, for one thing. That's fine. But now, how do they go about making those decisions? We'd like to think they do it in an absolutely ethical way, thinking where can we do the most good? That's what we try to do when we give out of our own individual pocketbooks or through our own individual volunteer time. We try to help in a way that will do the most good. Well, companies can try to do that, and some certainly do. But there are all sorts of pressures against that. And he worries about the possibility of corruption. He worries about the possibility of, in effect, blackmail. There are a number of organizations that raise large amounts of money from corporations. And they do it not because they're actually promoting the good of the community, and the corporations sincerely believe that, but instead because they threaten to blackmail the company. They threaten to start boycotts or initiate campaigns against the company, accusing them of all sorts of sins. And the company realizes this is a huge public relations problem. It doesn't want to be branded as racist or sexist or indifferent to the environment or blah, 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 whatever sort of issue it might be. And so they pay up to these various charities, quote unquote, these operations that end up being in the position, something like mafia gangs that offer companies protection. And you know what that means. It doesn't mean, faithful, good faith security services. It really means pay up or else. That kind of thing is encouraged, Friedman thinks, by this sort of thing. It becomes overt and obvious if you approach a small business owner, a single person, and demand money in this way. But within a corporation, you might say, it becomes just part of the cost of doing business in a community. And that, he thinks, is an extremely dangerous thing to encourage. So Friedman's worry is not only that this is an illegitimate thing if it does not have the consent of the owners, he worries that it also tends to push us further and further away from activities that really help the community and toward things that involve corruption, special interests, blackmail campaigns, threatened boycotts, and other things that expose a rather ugly side of things. Who ends up benefiting from the corporate social responsibility, he ends up thinking, tend to be the pet projects of the people who are in charge of this thing, which may or may not be good for the community at large. And then these things, basically the organizations that are willing to use coercion in order to get their aims, they're unlikely to be the ones that are actually doing the most good for the community. So to sum up, Friedman says the job of an owner is to look out for their own interests within the bounds of morality and the law. The job of the agent of an owner, that is to say a business manager, is to look out for the principles, the owner's interests within the bounds of morality and the law. That can permit a certain level of social responsibility on the part of the corporation if it rebounds to the benefit of the corporation. If it does not, then it requires the consent of the owners. If there is no practical way to get that consent, or that consent is not given, it is illegitimate. Moreover, setting up a system whereby these contributions may be given actually opens a Pandora's box of difficulties, a real danger of special interest groups, of corruption, of blackmail campaigns, boycott campaigns, and others exerting coercion on the corporation. So in short, the danger here is not only illegitimacy, but that the company is putting itself in danger of being coerced into making decisions it would never otherwise make.